I've never been one to really do the whole video route. Not sure why, but for this topic, I want to take that route to chat a little bit about San Bernardino and fears. Not really fears, I think anger and frustration based on the fact that a lot of people no longer really feel comfortable, safe in their communities. There's a national mission almost on the part of our politicians to do whatever they need to do, say whatever they need to say, to make it clear that Islam is not the issue, that it's radicals, that it's jihadists, that it's radical Islamists that we're at war with. Okay, I'll buy that to a point. So at the bottom of this video here, or when it finally ends up in the website on my blog, I'll put the links down below to the studies that I'm going to chat about here just a little bit. Pew did a poll the beginning of this year that was kind of illustrative to me. 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, 23% of the population. So they, when I say the words they, people of Muslim faith, regardless of nationality, of Muslim faith, are a significant portion of this world, as are Christians, as are Buddhists, as are Hindus. We are indeed a mixed pot of people out there. 20% of those live in the Middle East, and Middle East is Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Egypt, that core. The next they define is Asian Pacific, okay, and that's kind of a swath that goes, say, from the middle of the Red Sea to the west, includes Afghanistan, Pakistan, Indonesia, on into as far as the Philippines. That core is about 63% of the globe's population. Europe accounts, right now, Muslims in Europe account for about 10%, or I don't know, by 2050, it's supposed to be about 10% of the population. Although if you look at the size of this migration, it's getting pretty big. If we look at the U.S., 1% of our population is Muslim. 2.75 million, and of those, about 1.8 million are adults. However, 63% of those are immigrants. All right, they have no American core growing up in America. They are transplants. Now, obviously, if 1.8 million were jihadis, there'd be some real concern. However, this nation, when I grew up and when I was in school, part of the social studies approach to American society was that we were the great melting pot. My ancestors came in the mid-1800s and wanted to become Americans. Same with my wife, and same with, I think, the majority of folks my age. That seems to have changed, though, where now our nation relishes the idea of individual cultures living on the same landmass. It no longer seems to be in vogue to become American. I'm German American, or I'm Italian American, or I'm African American, or I'm Chinese American, or I'm Vietnamese American. American is secondary. Our founding cultures, our birth cultures, if you will, are now what's important. So the chances are that a significant number of the folks that are immigrants, again, regardless of nationality, faith, or whatever, they no longer see the value in becoming American. They simply want the benefits of living on American soil. When Pew did this research, they did some other odds and ends. If they looked at worldwide, 60% of Muslims believe that Sharia law should be the law. I believe a lot of that comes from the fact that Saudi Arabia is the single larger builders of mosques on the face of the earth. in their particular brand of Islam. Wahhabism is probably one of the most strict, quote unquote, Muslims, most fundamental Muslim interpretations of Islam. If you look at the United States, and you go back to the 1.8 million adults, half of those said that they would be fine with Sharia law being the law of the land. The only issue with that is that goes against the Constitution. There is a secular law in the United States that applies equal to all people across all faiths. There's a problem with that. If you look at the global population again, 25% of those felt that it was fine to use violence against those that spoke out against Islam, that in their view insulted the Prophet, insulted the religion. Use of violence was just fine. All right, so if you look at half that population, that's somewhere around 800 million Muslims that are okay with the use of violence if the rest of us do not follow their faith. So red flags start to go up just a little bit. They also did this same poll throughout the United States, and what they found here was that a quarter of those Muslims polled in the U.S. were okay with the use of violence if Islam was insulted. We have current versions of that approach that are pretty clear. You go down to the attack on the folks in Texas this summer. I think it was this summer on U.S. soil. There was recently a college prof in Missouri that dragged a daughter, I believe, out of school, slapped her upside the head because she forgot or chose not to wear the hijab. Again, some red flags. A 2013 poll also said that 13% of Americans were okay with using direct violence. Now that's American Islam or American Muslims, not the international polls, but Muslims polled within the U.S. If you look at 13%, that's 240,000 Muslims in the U.S. that are okay with the use of violence if someone, in their opinion, insults Islam. So from this point on, I'm going to make some assumptions, and I get it. Ask you and me, all of that, fine. But stick with me and see if this makes sense to you. So we've got 13% of the American population that is okay with violence. Now, obviously, all of them aren't going to be violent. No more than all Baptists, all Catholics, all Lutherans, all Buddhists, and all the other faiths that inhabit our country are. But if we drill down a little bit, let's say that 13% of that 13% are radicalized, okay, to the point where they've stepped over the line. They've made the choice that Sharia law is going to become the law of the land, that Islam is going to become the faith of the land, and they're committed. They're in. So if you got 13% of all adults in the U.S., Islamic adults, Muslim adults in the U.S., are okay with violence, that's 234,000. Let's say 13% of those have become radicalized. Now we're down to 30,420. So you say, Bill, that's just ridiculous. That's too high. All right, well, let's knock that down a little bit. Let's cut it in half. Okay, let's cut it in half. So now you have 15,210 Muslims that are in the boat. They've been radicalized. They're all in for the use of violence to promote their faith. Okay, Bill, 15,000, really? All right, well, let's cut that in half. All right, so now we're down to 2.25%, 7,605 that are all in, regardless of how they've gotten here, regardless of if there's any new penetrating, sneaking in the border today, coming in with the proposed Syrian refugees. Let's say they're just here. They've become radicalized like the couple in San Bernardino, whatever that term means, radicalized. That's 152 committed all-in jihadis per state. Okay, 152. I live in Iowa, all right, 3.5 million people. So if I'm a jihadi and I'm going to try and find a way to create the most fear, to have the largest impact, I'm going to look at larger cities. So let's look at the number of cities that are over 250,000 people. Okay, there's 81 of them in the U.S. That comes out to 93 focused jihad. Nice, nothing better than a phone call in the middle of one of these things. All right, so 250,000 cities that would provide soft targets, an easy array of soft targets. Now we're talking 223 people that are committed per city to cause damage. Think about that. Think about that. If you look at the attacks in Paris and you look at the attacks in San Bernardino, a couple things stick out. There's a common kit, if you will. High-powered semi-automatic or automatic weapons, AKs or AR-15s, plate carriers or battle belts of some sort to carry a significant amount of extra ammunition, sidearms also. Evidently not plate carriers, bulletproof vests. The media always likes to hop on that, but when they're all said and done, it usually comes out that there weren't those in use. But a common kit, which to me would imply that there's a regimen that's being put together to say, okay, if your intent on following through with jihad in support of Islam and Sharia law, this is your foundation. Now let's look at the folks in San Bernardino specifically. They fired 73 rounds. I think that's the count. I've heard anywhere from 71 to 75, so let's split the middle. 73 rounds. They had 14 people dead, and they had 21 wounded. I spend a fair amount of time on the shooting range, and a lot of people who read this blog do the same thing. That's good shooting. When you get right down to it, at the end of the day, that's good shooting. It doesn't happen by accident. You don't go down to your local five and dime, fill out your paperwork, do the waiting period, pick up a gun, walk into a Christmas party, and get that type of hit rate. So there was thought to it. As more information comes out, this obviously was planning for a year. So I guess what I'm saying is, in my mind's eye, you can argue with the numbers. If you look at 3.5% of the radicalized people, if you look at that as a percentage of the Muslim population in the U.S., that's about 0.4%. Okay, I'll say that one more time, 0.4%. And that shakes out to 223 jihadis in each of the cities in the United States with over 500,000 people population. They can do real damage. So why this approach? Okay, why this approach for ISIS or ISIL or the Daesh or whatever the hell we want to call it? I don't really care. Well, if you look at our own military, one of our goals has always been, and I spent 21 years in the military. I was in the Air Force. During the mid-'60s, the big hoopla was laser-guided bombs. For the first time, we had laser-guided bombs. If you look at DARPA and that whole community, and I also worked for I worked for Rockwell years ago, and they were all about developing better tech for the military, whether it be communications, guidance, aircraft navigation, whatever. That's their job. I think ISIL is dedicated to their job. They want a smart weapon. Okay, this is a smart weapon that can operate independently, that can draw its own conclusions, can find its own targets, can make decisions on the amount of weapons that are needed, the type of ammunition, the type of munitions in general, whether it be pipe bombs or car bombs or whatever. And they're simply turned loose on the world. The debate last night, and you listen to politicians on both sides, it seems there's the illusion that we can somehow put this cat back in the bag. Look at the global geospace that they're involved in, from Eastern Africa to the Western Philippines. Look how little it takes for a cell, in this case a man and a woman, to become, if they're committed to Sharia, if they're committed to this particular interpretation of Islam, look how easily they can wreak havoc as long as they keep their head down, get their gear, do the training, pick their target, and then are committed to go home in a Ziploc bag. They were new parents, okay? New parents. Within the last week, this is being taped the middle of December. Within the last 2 weeks, there was a woman in Pakistan with her 3 children that walked up to a police checkpoint and blew the family up. That's the level of commitment. That's the cat that we're trying to put back in the bag. Bottom line is, again, my opinion, and I get it. Opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. My opinion is this particular cat is well and truly out of the bag, and our politicians are just behind the curve and recognizing it. And I understand why. I mean, I get it. It's a huge admission, number one. It's a huge commitment, number two. We've been at war since 2001. Actually, it started in the late 90s with Kenya and the coal and Yemen and Kobe Towers and all of those happenings that those in power chose to ignore, and took us down the road of being in Osama bin Laden's case, looking at us and seeing a weak horse. Well, folks, we're a weak horse right now, and we are up against an enemy that's focused, committed, and when I say committed, I mean committed to the point where they'll push the button and blow up their family to make their point. So where does that leave us as citizens of the United States? I have a saying that I put in a number of my blog posts. It says, help's not coming. Listen to those words. Help is not coming. Response time at San Bernardino was sub 5 minutes. That's fast. Okay? That's fast. The best thing I can say, and virtually any firearms trainer that you talk to, you got to look in the mirror. There's your help, okay? That's the person that's responsible for protecting your butt. Not the cop down the road, not the cop in the station, not the state patrolman cruising the highway, not the local sheriff that's in the other side of the county. The person in the mirror is the person that's responsible for defending yourself, your family, or those that you've chosen to take care of. That's it. That doesn't mean getting a carry permit. Okay, carry permits are cool, they're nice, they're legal, all of that. I get that. Get one, but then do the right thing, get the right training, train consistently, take coursework that gets you where you want to go, and then take that coursework to the range and train on your own consistently. So I guess I don't want this to sound like I'm bashing Islam. I'm cautious about it. Their goals are different than traditional American goals that I grew up with in the 50s and 60s. Half the folks in the country would be happy with Sharia law. Take a walk through the paper and see how Sharia law works for the population in Saudi Arabia, because that's what's being taught in the majority of mosques in the world because the Saudis build them. The Saudis act as the training ground for their imams. Not really sure where to go with this. This is a story that's unfolding, that we're all involved in. And all I can say is get training, train hard, take it serious, carry every day, put a med kit in your car, because you're the answer. You're your only defense for the first 5 minutes, first 10 minutes. The person in the mirror that you see every morning is the person that's going to take care of you. I'd appreciate some comments on this. Throw them in the bottom of the blog post here. See what you think. And we'll see. Maybe we'll do another one of these videos or not. I prefer writing, but this one just needed to seemed to needed to come out of my mouth as opposed to out of my fingers. You have a good day. We'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.